today we're not just having a conversation, we want to step, all of us, our full presence into a very sacred space, a psychologically safe space. And in this world, where so many feel silenced, unseen, or unsafe, coaching offers something more, something quite radical, healing, different, transformative. So, psychological safety isn't just a nice to have, it's a human need. And in our coaching space, it's not only just our responsibility, it's also our gift. As you're all aware, we live in times marked by uncertainty, exclusion, and trauma. And yet, even amidst all of this, there is one place where healing can begin in the presence of another who listens without judgment, who holds a space of the client's agenda, and who believes that every story deserves to be heard. So this session will go beyond frameworks and more will evolve as we are speaking together. So I invite you today to listen, not just with your ears, but with your whole self. And let's together explore how coaching can become not just a profession, but a quiet revolution of healing and hope. And I'll stop here and invite both Ram and Priya to contribute to the topic.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. And we know how much the role this plays in a coaching scenario. To me, personally, I think psychological safety is a very, very personal experience, almost an emotional one. And the potential that space has in order to touch people beyond, like you said, surface level, deep, for them to show up in their most vulnerable and authentic self. I think for me, therefore, it's a very sacred space that as coaches we can create, and we can experience it ourselves in that process.
Ram?
Okay. When we speak of psychological safety, it's something that I've been pondering for quite some time. Yes, practically everybody associates it with the person who created that word in an HBR article way back in 1999, Amy Edmondson. There's nobody who doesn't know Amy Edmondson if you use the word psychological safety as it were. But the fact is that even about whenever ICF started, probably roughly about 10 years before that, ICF is celebrating its 30 years now. So, or 6 years, whatever number of years. At that time, the coaching competency that ICF had, which was then created by Thomas Leonard in his famous portable coach and followed by ICF, already had the competency which was about trust and then after presence. The question to me has always been, so can you really have trust without safety? Can you feel safe without trust? So what really is the difference? And of course, ICF has now used the word safety as well, that in the last few years. But before that, there wasn't. It was just trust and intimacy, if I remember right. And then there was presence. When you go deeper into that, and those of you, I'm not a great scholar on Amy Edmondson. Yeah, I have listened to her TED talk and I've read some of her books. I'm familiar with articles. There are two parts to the framework. We are not going to go too deep into it. And after this, I'll ask Cindy and Priya to comment. The first one is about those four states that they talk about, motivation versus motivation, accountability, and psychological safety, which is about apathy, anxiety, uh, what is it called, comfort, and then learning. And then when you come into learning, there are four stages, which are about inclusive, what is it next, learning, and then it's about contributing, and then it's about challenging. Now, just for a moment, imagine this. Of course, all of Amy Edmonds' work is about workplace examples of how companies have benefited tremendously by being psychologically safe. And even there, of course, there are some studies, if you have gone deep enough into it, where it is shown that the more psychologically safe, we have a danger of people becoming too comfortable. But then that in turn probably leads to a certain amount of learning and innovation and so on and so forth. I have been a student of management sciences from the time of Peter Drucker, and after that, many other people, Jim Collins, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I found was that if you go into the basics of organizations, the first three parts of what is considered to be the staples of psychological safety, inclusion, which is like belonging, and then which is about the learning process and contributing. They are present in organizations which you may not at all associate with psychological safety. For instance, if you take the military or the church or any of these organizations, they are not known for that kind of a, they don't allow you to challenge. The last stage of what is called psychological safety is absent there. But whether you feel belonging or whether you learn, whether you contribute, etc., there's an enormous amount that happens in, for example, the military or the church and similar organizations themselves. And therefore, I've always wondered, this is something that we can develop a little bit more, as to what really is the meaning of psychological safety. Is it just about a bit of emotional intelligence that you say, okay, instead of cognitive intelligence, if you're able to move into empathy and stuff like that, then you are in that better space? But for me, when Cindy talked about going beyond the framework of psychological safety as defined today by people like Amy Edmonds and so on, are they really missing something? And to me, the factor that they are missing, as I would posit, is about spiritual intelligence. We had last year for the ICW, we had Dana Sohar, Lisa Miller, people who celebrate spiritual intelligence in faith. And Dana Zohar is sort of a person who has defined what spiritual intelligence is with about 12 principles, which are about humility, compassion, and so on and so forth. Do they create a space which is greater than psychological safety? And to me, the answer is yes. It's not merely about someone being motivated, someone feeling, yeah, I can be creative, innovative, etc. And which can be possible even in places which do not allow you to feel safe in terms of expressing whatever you feel like. But if you really have to be that as it is defined in psychological safety, you have to be spiritually safe. So is the right word to use, is it spiritual safety? So I'll just stop here.
Let's dive into all pieces of what you, Priya, and I touched upon in a deeper way. But may I also invite everybody on this call to reflect and answer this question. When you hear the word psychological safety, what comes alive for you or in you? What shows up when you use this word, when you hear this word psychological safety? So I want to talk a bit about that, this kind of internal safety. And yeah, what do people associate it with? Because there seems to be a sense of trust, vulnerability showing up in the way we just spoke about now. And you also get a sense that safety isn't just the absence of fear, it's the permission or it's the presence of permission to be authentic, imperfect, discomfort, or emotionally honest. It's like giving permission to show up in however state you are now. And the permission is not just from the coach or the coaching process or the client, it shows up in all aspects of the three. Like if one is missing, the client is not going to get vulnerable and go into a deeper space of trust. So how can a coaching conversation be truly transformative without this feeling or this experience that Priya was talking about, the sense, this inner sense of safety?
It's tough, right? I think, I
Yeah,
think, I think there is, to me, Cindy, as you speak this, I'm also reminded of the work by Carl Rogers, right?
yeah.
And he talks about the environment or the space. In a coaching scenario, what we're really saying is, as a coach, can I create that environment and space? Can I hold this space for someone to see themselves for who they are? And in that space, they are getting in touch with parts of themselves that has probably never shown up before. They're afraid to share that part of themselves. So that space to me is a very sacred space where one can be absolutely authentic and vulnerable. And I think the coach has a role to play there in order to create that space for vulnerability and one's own vulnerability coming through as a coach, to be present there in the best way possible. And that safety is, I mean, anybody, and I called it a personal experience mainly because you can do what you like to create that space, but how that person actually perceive it is a very personal thing. And there's a lot of conditioning, there's a lot of uh, background to how they receive this. Yeah, I see you
Yeah.
smile, Cindy. What's coming up?
Yeah, yeah, it just reminded me of something because coaches can't give internal safety to the clients. We can't do that, right? But we can create the conditions for it to emerge.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
And what is that condition? I often think, right? What is it that we do to create that environment of safety? I think it's really, and I always say this, the fundamental human need is to be seen and heard. In a world that is so polarized, everything is right or wrong, good or bad. Here is a space where it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. It's just your experience.
Hmm.
How beautiful is that?
Absolutely. Because so many times our clients say things like, I've never said that before.
Mhm.
It really feels really good talking about it now. So
Mm.
to go into the question you we just raising, Priya, we're looking for some sort of cues, right? Whether it's the client is taking some risk to become more vulnerable in the language they're using, or maybe the emotional expression, or like something deeper, like a deeper, what's the word, disclosure, like I'm
Mm.
disclosing something, or maybe even in the pauses and the silence. And maybe, that client that never had a chance to voice something aloud. So that's a signal That is
Mm.
like a signal that safety is present.
Yes. Yes.
Ram, you want to add in here?
Cindy, all of us have been in places in our training programs.
Mm,
Like Priya talks about the sacred space, I would call it a spiritual space.
mm,
And our first responsibility in any kind of, not just the coaching, but coach training as well, we provide that space. But you and I know that in spite of whatever trust and safety and whatever else you provide, there are some people who invariably feel unsafe. And that is expressed in many ways. So it's not about, when I think about it, I mean, yeah, the coach has a responsibility to provide that space. Does the coach have the accountability to make the individual feel safe? Absolutely not. It
Yeah.
depends on that individual. Okay. So that is really where I see the dichotomy in terms of when we talk about, okay, an organization has to create, somebody in the chat I saw, oh, I'm looking for how organizations can create a safe space. Yeah, sure, they can. But whether you feel safe or not is within your locus of control.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you are
absolutely.
invalidated, disempowered, and right through your life have been suffering from traumas, so you blame the organization, you will hold somebody responsible. That's all the blame game that you play. And we come across those even in people who claim to be coaches, some even master coaches. And I can tell you this from experience. I worked for corporates, multiple corporates. Some were terrible, toxic, no question about it. And I also worked with some amazingly great companies where I was a maverick and people not only tolerated me, they celebrated me. And they were allowed, I was allowed to challenge anybody. And I was in totally a space where I could be spiritually and psychologically and everything else free. On the other hand, then for 7 years in my stupidity, I went through a spiritual path. And that spiritual path was toxic. And this guy who's supposed to be a guru made it important that I didn't have a mind of my own. I had to be brainwashed and so many others. And that is what most of the people today on the spiritual path are. Therefore, someone pretending to be spiritual doesn't necessarily provide you that spiritual safety for you to do something to be free. Nor does an organization which doesn't believe in all that, but I want to make money, but still it'll provide you a space where you can be completely free. So there are two parameters which are coming here. And I want to look at it from an OD perspective, organization development perspective. There is something called the intra-organizational, which is about people within that organization. What do they feel within themselves? In OD, there's this concept of realizing self. And that's extremely important. We have to discover who we are. In coaching, it's extremely important. That's why in Kocharya, we believe the first pillar of any coaching is self-coaching and self-discovery. And that's what helps you to just sort of discover your locus of control. And don't try and shift it to somebody else, that somebody has to take care of you. And then you come into what is called the inter-organizational space. The inter-organizational space between people who interact with each other as teams or in families or whatever it is. And there, it's relational. It becomes more of social intelligence, emotional intelligence, and so on and so forth. And beyond that, there is the third space, which is extra-organizational, outside, which could be a team of teams. And you interact with multiple other places where you do that, where your locus of control completely shifts. And in that space of extra-organization, nobody can make you feel safe. You can complain for the rest of your life, still come home, that Trump is this, poison, and so on and so forth. Somebody else is this, that, whatever it is. You can't change it. You can only change yourself. So some of the things that I would like people to look at when they talk about psychological safety, How much are you investing in creating that psychological or spiritual safety within yourself? Instead of blaming other people, oh, they are creating a toxic space. Nobody can create a toxic space for you. Nobody can create stress for you. Stress is something scientifically, neurobiologically, it's proven that you create for yourself. And the same way is toxicity. Stop there.
So let's explore that question. Like, we can't just leave it hanging. Amidst all this chaos, uncertainty, difficult environments that we all face sometimes, or even that our clients are facing, what makes it safe inside us? How do we know, or how do we embody some sense of safety inside us that helps us cope in difficult times?
For me, Cindy, such a beautiful question. I think for me, it is partly what Ram said also, that we really have to look at safety. There are two factors in my mind. One is the external events that happen, the external environment that you live in, uh, which is sometimes shifting, sometimes mostly shifting. There's so much chaos. There's a lot of geopolitical situations that happen. COVID was a great example of something that happened. People were afraid. So there are external factors that trigger that. But we're also talking about the internal climate or the internal environment that we create for ourselves. And that's in our control. But to be able to even bring it under our control, so to say, or recognize that it is for us to make that change, to find that safety within ourselves, I think sometimes it requires a nudge or a fellow traveler or someone to provide that space for them to say, it's really okay. It's really okay. I'm in charge. I'm in charge of how I'm feeling. And where can I find that little space within myself where I can take charge when so many other things are in flux?
Hmm.
And what do we do in coaching, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's about client autonomy. It's really about saying, how can you take charge of what's within your control and find the courage to be able to provide that for yourself?
Yeah, I love what you're saying about how do you take control, because safety increases when those unspoken or unsaid become said. When you say it out aloud, then your safety increases because you're naming it. You're naming what makes you feel unsafe. And if you're naming it, then the process can begin into exploring what needs to happen for you to fix it, or to create a practice or a process that will help you cope with it,
Absolutely.
like some sort of empowerment or control. Ram?
Yeah, again, let me be slightly different. Um, when we feel unsafe, what do we experience? We feel fearful. You might call it
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, whatever it might be. And I think Tracy is somewhere in the audience. She runs this program, webinar about, it's beautiful. Fear is not going to go away pretending that it doesn't exist. You need courage to be able to face the fear. That's the only way that fear will go. And the same way, this whole concept of toxicity or unsafe or stress or anything, it is something that we have to be determined to face it. I've been a spiritual healer for a large part of my life. And one of the things in spiritual healing is you don't do anything. The whole job of the healer is not to do anything at all. You are just sharing your energy, as it were, with the other person, allowing that person to share whatever they wish to share. You are passive, fully recognizing that you have no role to play, that you are just a conduit for the energy of the universe. To me, that's one of the highest levels of spiritual intelligence. And that is where, whether you want to call it psychological safety or you want to reterm it as spiritual intelligence or spiritual safety, where if you really want to challenge somebody, do you feel adequate, first of all? And what is it that you need to be to feel adequate? You need to be empowered. You need to be without baggages. You need to self-coach yourself. You need to be empowered. So I think that is where all coaching must start. And that's where coaching starts, actually. Unfortunately, we are in such a hurry that we don't practice what we learn about coaching on ourselves, but we want to try it out on others without having cured ourselves of our baggages. I mean, all three of us know, Priya, you and Cindy, that we come across MCC level coaches who still have serious baggages that they carry. And they have blind spots. If you're aware of them, that's fine. But if you're not aware of them, it's highly dangerous. So are we making that effort to remove the toxicity from within ourselves? And therefore, do we take the responsibility for us to be, and I would like to use this word rather than psychological safety, spiritually safe? And then in that space, can we help people? Over to you.
So, Ram,
Okay.
what you say seems, triggered something for me. And, we've often told, and I know science has said that we are energy beings, right? That when three of us are talking, when there's a group here, there is an exchange of energy all the time. And if you're looking at what is it that the coach can do, create that space, is be your energetic best and do whatever it takes for you to be in that space, whatever cleansing, whatever inner work, whatever books that you read. So your own inner journey, you're able to elevate your energy level in a way that when you create this container or space for the client is also able to experience that energy.
Yeah.
I know they might not be at the same level, not everybody is ready to speak, not everybody is ready to share, but a constant energetic being, in my opinion, transfer the energy to the client who's in that space, to anybody who's in that same space. And that has a
Absolutely.
big role to play, right? I mean, there's an exchange there.
Yeah.
Cindy, what's coming up?
Yeah. Safety. Safety isn't the absence of risk. It's the
Yeah.
permission to be yourself in the face of it.
Yes.
So we feel safest not when nothing is wrong, but when we are free to show up as we are, even in the imperfection, even in the fear, which means that in a coaching relationship, if you, as you are saying, Priya, and as Ram said, if your energy and you showing up well as a coach, then you have created that space for the client to show up with all their discomfort and imperfections. Because it's like there's a silent message here. I may not be safe out there, but I'm safe inside here, in my
Mm.
throat, in my breath, in this moment that I'm sharing with you. I feel safe. And that starts a process of spiritual, psychological safety for the client to explore more and take away some insights or practices that they can begin to grow for themselves. Because I
Mm.
want to say one more thing here. When Ram was talking about courage, absolutely, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is working or walking in your own integrity towards your purpose, aligning to your purpose, to your whys. When you get up every day, you have all these whys. I want to do this. And you're quite committed and passionate about all your purposes. Having courage is being able to walk towards or in that integrity.
With fear walking with you, actually.
Yeah,
Fear
yeah,
walks with you. It's just that
absolutely.
courage is louder than that.
Yeah, from what
Yeah,
you said earlier,
yeah,
all that you really have to, if you know how to, is to share your energy.
Mm,
We are all energy beings encased in matter. We don't realize that we have energy. There's a whole problem. In another way, putting it differently, when we talk about facing fear, and courage is not the same as, let's say, overcoming fear, whatever. In the Mahabharata, there are two people who were considered to be completely fearless. One was Duryodhana, strangely, and the other was Arjuna. Duryodhana was considered fearless because he didn't understand fear. He was a moron
mm,
and he was evil. But Arjuna understood fear and he cried. And therefore, the simple way of putting it, I would say men who are capable of crying are the most courageous because they know how to cry and they know how to get rid of their toxicity. But men who believe that they are very strong and they have to impose themselves on somebody else, they are the ones who are toxic for themselves and they are toxic for other people. I mean, this I have evidence again and again, multiple times, and this can be used as a measure. So, what it requires at the end of the day is, can you subsume and transcend that toxicity within yourself and come out as if you are cleansed in a crucible, shining as your energy being, like you put, Priya.
yeah,
And there's a process for it. Every day in the morning, I spend about 15 minutes just imagining myself, visualizing, manifesting myself as an energy being. It's simple. And in every one of my classes, I usually do one program where I teach people how to meditate. This is part of that. So that is all that you have to do. And you eventually get there in that space. But most of us
mm,
don't have the time for it. We spend that time, 15 minutes, which you could spend in cleansing yourself, in trying to find
yeah,
somebody else to blame. And then we say, oh, no, 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 we are not in a psychologically safe space. This person is making me feel unsafe. You'll
yeah.
always find somebody else who will make you unsafe. The world is not going to be rid of such people then.
So that's a lovely point you raised, Ram, because humans are wired for connection, right? I mean, yeah,
yes.
we love connection. And you just spoke about the example with the experience with John and with me. And in there, you spoke about this human connection. When, when like in the space of unsafety, we kind of borrow safety from another. So when we're in the presence of somebody calm, attuned, non-judgmental, like a coach, our own nervous system often mirrors that state. So in
Mm.
unsafe spaces, another person's grounded presence can help you regulate your own, borrowing, of course, from emotional intelligence. Um, what do you want to add? Do you want to add anything to that, Priya? This
It's
human
really beautiful.
connection.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and for me, Cindy, when you talked about connection and Ram talked about visualization as an energy being, I think one of the things is two thoughts come to my mind. One is the importance of rituals, anchor ourselves in the midst of chaos. What is it that we do, whether it is as a coach or as an individual? What are some rituals that will help us to anchor and feel grounded in the midst of feeling unsafe or feeling threatened at any point? That is that's something that we need to develop for ourselves, and
yeah,
uh, I think that has a big part to play because when there is no external support, you have your anchor, whatever that may be. And for me, anchor is some sort of a ritual,
Yeah,
whatever
absolutely.
that means for each one of us, right? Whatever that ritual is.
And to
And
all our participants, please share with us the point that Priya is making, what makes us feel safe, what practices you have. So as Priya continues talking, please would you type, what do you do to feel safe for yourself or to help your clients? Oh, sorry, Priya, I spoke
no,
over you.
Cindy and Ram, something totally contrary also emerged in my mind, which is to say, what about coaches' safety? What about coaches' psychological safety, right? If we work on ourselves to be, like you said, be there for the other, but what about um, what's the work that we are doing in order that we feel safe in the presence of a client? Because there's an energy transfer this way as well.
Yeah, yeah. Because that happens in coaching, right? That does happen within the session. It can happen to the best of us. I mean, I know if I am not feeling myself, my energy's dropped, or something has happened within the session, taking a moment of silence or like a little pause there helps me to ground myself,
Hmm.
So, yeah, what do you normally do, Priya?
It's a question that came up. I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's an answer that spontaneously came up. I'm sure there's
yeah.
much more.
I mean, Priya, the answer is, to my mind, it's very, very simple. And I have worked with many of you as your supervisor. And this is an issue which comes up very often in
Yeah.
supervision, okay,
Yeah.
that I feel threatened, not
Mm.
necessarily by the client per se, not because the client is 8 feet tall and 40 feet broad or whatever it is. But the fact is, in some ways, the client is behaving in a way that doesn't make me feel comfortable. And I don't know how to express it. So it's absolutely essential. What you're saying is very true. If a coach is not comfortable in the space where they have no business coaching, period. I mean, if you read on Becoming a Person, Carl Rogers, and have listened to his video with Gloria, and he says somewhere that when he coached Gloria way back in the 50s, Gloria was a divorcee and she had a 10-year-old daughter and he was trying to develop a relationship. He said, every cell of my body revolted against that, given my Presbyterian values.
Mm.
And I didn't know initially how to deal with it. Then I expressed it to her and said, this is how I feel. And I feel ashamed of it. And I wanted her to be aware of that. And therefore, one way, a very simple way you ask for an answer is to tell the client, this is how I feel about it. If the coach has the courage to be able to do that,
Mm.
then the coach is removing the toxicity from themselves and allowing themselves to relate with their client. There's no other way.
Absolutely.
If that is what Carl Rogers means by congruence. In the three-sided
Mm.
picture, empathy, unconditional positive regard, everybody celebrates unconditional positive regard without even knowing what it is. It's impossible to be unconditionally positive regard for a human being. Okay, if you're a
Mm.
saint, maybe. But that unconditional positive regard is developed through congruence, which is authenticity and empathy. And again, empathy, it's not necessarily a good word. There's something called tribal empathy. And tribal empathy is a bad word. The terrorists are tribal empathists because they are empathizing with their own tribe and they turn against others. And this is
Ram, I have another question for you, bearing the time that we have, and this one is important. So, this coaching in unsafe environments, more is showing up with our clients. Our clients are sharing more. They're sharing some things around current trauma, uncomfortable experiences. So, this question is for you. In what ways can we be trauma aware without becoming therapists?
Look, I have two answers to this. It depends on the trauma, okay? For example, if the trauma is grief, I tell people who I train, shut your mouth, just listen. There's nothing that you can do. No platitudes, no nothing. And especially if you're doing it virtually and so on. But if it is something else, then which is what now, surprisingly, many ICF chapters now reaching out to me to do the demonstration on somatic awareness coaching, which is about the metadata, that you are no longer exploring cognition or emotion, which is really cognitive. So you ask the client, oh, how are you feeling? And the client answers you about their thoughts. In what way are you exploring emotions? It's hypocrisy. So these are both corrupted interpretations of the mind. The first responders in your brain are sensory data, and they reach the midbrain, and the hippocampus, which is a memory base, sorts it out and feeds it to the hypothalamus and amygdala, and then emotions are labeled, and then it goes to the frontal cortex. So when we are exploring emotions, we are exploring data which is once corrupted. When you are exploring thoughts, it is twice corrupted. But if you are exploring the senses, you go directly into it. So I don't ask anymore anybody, what is it you are thinking? What is it that you are feeling? I said, what are you sensing in your body? If you could just take a few minutes, take your time and sense in your body what you're feeling. And that sensation that you have is the primary data of what you're feeling. If you're feeling unsafe, believe you me, it'll reflect in your stomach. And today, neuroscience, not only neuroscience, this is neuroscience. Quantum science says something called observer effect. Things behave differently when you observe them. So you just observe that feeling in your stomach, and the stress will go away, the toxicity will go away. Experience it. So that initially requires some courage, like Tracy pointed out. So this is very simple. I think instead of just blindly going into this is a competency markers and so on and so forth. And what I'm saying is today used as a nonviolent communication model of Rosenberg, clean language by David Grove. If you put those together in terms of observations, feelings, acceptance, etc., and David Grove's methodology of how you question, automatically it follows into that pattern, what we call LASIE-ACT in Kocharya, sensations, emotions, and thoughts, but focus on sensations. And that's one of the most powerful ways that coaches can themselves get rid of the negativities within their system and be able to answer such questions like Priya is raising. Okay, if the client threatens me, just go into yourself for a few seconds and try and feel where that is residing. And that'll you a lot. And take a few deep breaths and exhale fast, and it'll go away. I'm quite happy to do that with this forum in another class as a full meditation experience or sensory awareness experience. But yeah, now there are at least about 6 or 7 ICF chapters whom I have done this work with, and 3, 4 more are in pipeline. So this is getting sort of conveyed across the ICF forum as well.
So in a sense, we talk about energy healing as you did, Priya, and from what Ram is saying, the process of coaching is quite healing. And coaches are quite healing in the way they coach their clients. They offer themselves as an healer to the clients, but not in the sense of therapy, more in the sense of current, what's going on with the client, and how can we help our client move from the current state into a state that's more manageable for them. And I mean, of course, there's a lot of indicators that that is true. The statement holds true that coaching and coaches are healers and healing. Because by definition, clients leave the session feeling a bit more empowered, a bit more inspired, even if it's with themselves on an action they're taking. And of course, you get a sense of progress and learning happening. What do you want to say, Priya?
It's very beautiful what you said, Cindy. And what this brings up for me is that what we talk about feeling empowered and inspired, um, we have to meet the client where they are. It starts from that. And to me, this process of feeling psychologically safe or creating psychological safety is a journey. And it's not something that is done one time and it's done. It is an ongoing process, right? And when it's an ongoing process, what we are really inviting the client is offering them a space to vent, to meet what is difficult for them to meet alone,
Yeah.
to vent, to process. Unless they meet that, they don't know what to process, right? So you meet, you process, then you explore, you adapt, and from there you grow. So it is a process in my view, and it's not a one-off event, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely 100+% right. What I would simply suggest is this. Each of us turn client every day at the end of the day for 10 minutes. So you be a coach to yourself as a client. Unload yourself, try if you wish, and think about what happened during the day, what could have been better, what I could have done better, what I could have done differently, if not better. Just that process, if you're able to do to 5 to 10 minutes, the pure reflection at the end of the day. You don't have to journal. Just the fact of doing it and observing yourself somatically, you will find a huge difference happening within people. And I worked with people who for 20 years carried guilt and grief. And roughly 2 sessions, they have managed to get out of it. It's possible. It's not any miracle that we are breaking here. They are doing the miracle themselves within them, because we have that infinite potential to be able to do that. So I totally 100% agree. But ultimately, we have to take the responsibility. The client is not going to take the responsibility. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And it says cultivates trust and safety, implying it's not there all the time, right? We got to work at it, both coach, client, and within the process. Absolutely. And we've got a few minutes to go. Yamini, is there any questions that showing up that you'd like us to answer, to pay attention to? And of course, to all our participants, if there's anything that we missed, feel free to raise it on the chat, or any thoughts that's evolving and emerged for you, also put it onto the chat so we can go away feeling a bit more empowered from today's conversation.
that's absolutely a good question. That's what we have been saying all along.
Yeah.
Oh no. Therefore, it's up to the other person to be able to feel safe themselves or raise an issue. All that you can do is to create as respectful. And that is what spirituality is about. When you place the other person ahead of you. And so if you are spiritual in terms of your coaching, and like what Priya said, the ritual, which is about respecting the other person and giving them whatever acknowledgement, appreciation that is required, that is what the best that you can do. Beyond that, they have to work on themselves.
Yeah, and just ask the client, right? What do they need to feel safe? And then work with them on all those pieces. More begins to emerge for them. It becomes expanded. They have more options and more choices.
Somebody asked a question. It says, look, I mean, I don't like to use the word psychosomatic because psychosomatic has a completely different meaning in psychology. Like, for example, you would say that ulcers are psychosomatic disease, which is caused through problems that you experience in the body because of something that goes in the mind. That word has no longer any relevance in the realm of psychology because today that arose from a time when the mind and body were considered to be two separate things. It's not. The mind and body are completely integrated. And therefore, whatever is somatic is also psychological. What is psychological is also somatic. And so you practice both together. And we've found in our experience that going into, like, for example, if you say ontological, what does ontological mean? It doesn't mean gazing at your navel and asking cognitive questions about yourself and call it ontology. That is not ontology. Ontology is a science of being. And the science of being can only be discovered in silence, not by asking questions. So you got to really turn into yourself and ask questions. So yeah, Poonam, in some ways, if you want to interpret it that way, psychosomatic, but I would just leave it as, that's why I don't want to use the words psychological or somatic and so on and so forth. I use the word sensory awareness, sensory awareness, which is much simpler because then you know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, a bit of biopsychosomatic also, because we weigh up our body and what goes on there. Yeah. I guess we're learning to engage with some things new and not just keeping the boundaries of what we know. We're listening to what's showing up for the client and how to engage with it in different ways. And of course, if another modality shows up, then again, we're engaging with the client as to what more they need.
Yeah. Cindy,
But
just
exploring with the client, if you don't explore with the client, you're never going to know if another modality is showing up.
Yep. Somebody asked, what is your theory of spiritual intelligence? My suggestion is just, it is there in Kocharya website in multiple places. When we talk about spiritual intelligence, all that we are really saying is beyond just being empathetic and curious and so on and so forth. Can you really be compassionate about the other person? Can you treat the other person with respect? Like Priya earlier said, can you treat the other person as your own extension of your energy? And that is what spirituality is. And the moment you do that, then, you know, nothing else matters because the other person is more important than you are. And that is really the true expression of spirituality.
Yep. Who am I and how do I connect to the world?
And that in quantum science is today called entanglement. And it's a proven quantum science principle that we are all connected. We're all connected because we all arose from that one single whatever space there was before. And all that we have to do is to realize that we are connected as energy beings and we can help each other.
So my closing thoughts here as we're rounding up is that we want to touch something. Like, 1 hour, you can't really fully explore all parts of it. And we hope that we've touched it enough for you to continue with more that your client needs. Pay attention to what's more and how you can work with it. And Ram is speaking about her somatic experiences, has quite a few videos on it. So I'm not sure how we're going to get that to you, but please do connect
They're
with
all
us
on
if you
YouTube,
find it.
Cindy. They're all on
Oh,
YouTube.
yeah. They're on Kocharya's YouTube channel. You can check that there. Yamini put a link up. Priya, you and Ram, go ahead and say what you need to complete.
Yeah, I think I hold on to the view that psychological safety is a very personal experience. And there is a part of it which is a coach's responsibility. And for me, that part is the work that you do on yourselves, in your own being, and how you show up, which allows for the other. Whether they do or not is a different story, but it gives them permission, allows them to be who they are. And so there's a lot of responsibility which lies in the coach to work on themselves and create that for somebody. So it's not something that they do as much as who they are. And from that space, what they do is what allows for the safety to emerge.
Yeah. Yeah, Priya, it's beautiful what you're saying, because the moment somebody says to me, can I talk to you within the coaching space, I know immediately the psychological safety is already happening. Yeah, I feel the sense of responsibility towards that. Ram, please take my time to read all your messages. But for now, thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks, Cindy. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
All the best.
Bye. Bye, everyone.